people see that I do well in daily fantasy. Give me a tip. Should I play this guy? Stupid fucking questions, right? And whenever I get asked, what's the biggest tip? The biggest tip. And there's no such thing as like an easy button tip where I'm just like, well, if you just do this, on rainy Wednesdays, play the guy with the last name with a W. That doesn't work. The biggest tip by far for success in daily fantasy is treating it as a game and I'm not saying not caring about the sport. It's a game in and of itself, and it's played with sports performance. It's very similar to poker. You get good in poker when you realize it's not a game of cards played with money. It's a game of money played with cards. It's the same way that it's not a game of sports played with statistics or something. It's a game of statistics played with sports performance, okay? That's the fundamental thing. This is outside of even game theory, which is a separate thing in and of itself. But the fundamental concept of DFS is that a salary-based daily fantasy is that you have a certain salary, you get the most points for the least amount of salary. Essentially, you're trying to get your 50K in cap or whatever on DraftKings, getting the most amount of points for 50K. If there was no salary, you just play all the best. You'd play Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, and Odell Beckham Jr. You'd play all of them, right? You play Gurley, you'd play all the top guys because they're more likely to put up a lot of points. But you don't get to do that. You have to assess, piece it all together, and is this going to get bigger score than others? And then, depending on the contests that you're playing, always understand in any game environment, your goal is to be better than your opponent, okay? And it's not putting up points. It's all in relative to each other. If you're playing a head-to-head match against someone who is rostering all injured players and getting a 0, your goal is to score 1 point. That's it. You don't have to score 1,000,000 points. Just one. That's it. All you have to do is be better than your opponents, and you make money. Now, if you're in a top-heavy GPP with 1,000,000 fucking opponents, you got to be better than fucking all of them, right? If you're in a 10-man 50-50, you just got to be better than 5 of them, okay? So weighing what you're trying to accomplish determines the strategy in which you employ to putting together your lineup. When you're trying to win $1 million in the Million Maker, you're looking to get outlier performances, right? Right. You're looking to just you're getting the highest of it. You need to beat 400,000 people, right? Head to head, just have to beat one person, right? You don't need 100 million points. You just need 1 point more than your opponent. That's it. Poker's similar thing. You could be the 10th best player in the world. If you're sitting at a table with the 9 better players in the world, you're going broke. You're going fucking broke. So you find contests and then play for the play style of that contest. Okay. These are general things right now. Okay? I'm not even getting into the fucking math. I even got fucking little charts and shit, right? To try to explain it further. Okay. So ultimately, DFS, outside of the salary constraint, I mean, you kind of like fantasy point per dollar. So, I mean, it's going to be salary adjusted, these things. I got a little snot ball on my fucking nose. Okay. So, predictively, when we have a 12-game NFL slate, you're looking to see is X guy is worth X dollar, right? Is Jared Goff worth $6,000? Okay, now the term worth depends on the contest that you're in. If you ran this slate 1,000,000 times, that you'll need a 150-point score to beat 55% of your opponents, that's a cash game, right? If I get 150 points, I'm going to hit the 55th percentile more often than not, right? Right over there. So I need like 3 times value. That's the 50K salary, 3x to get to that point for my whole lineup, obviously. Okay, now if you need to hit a 250-point score, if you're aiming for that, you're going to need 5x. Okay, these are very broad based, but I just want to say the concept. You don't have to go. It's all relative to the slate. There's soccer slates where you score 54 points and you win a GPP. There are other ones where there's 1,000,000 fucking goals on an 8-game slate, and if you don't hit 120, you're not even cashing in double ups. So it's all relative to the slate. All these numbers aren't like in stone. But when you look at a game, when you look at like you were looking at the Falcons Buccaneers game that's coming up, which is the highest total. Okay, the higher total games, faster games with more plays, more opportunities. The more opportunities there are to score points, the more points that will most likely be scored. Okay? But the distribution of those points in that game is that's what we're trying to figure out. Right? Oh, this team's gonna, the Cowboys. You go, a lot of the distribution of the points is probably gonna go to Ezekiel Elliott. Right? We know that. But it's gonna be a low total. So the pie is smaller, but Ezekiel Elliott gets a bigger piece of that pie. Versus another game where you go to the Buccaneers and you go, well, that game has a higher total, bigger pie, but how much piece is Evans going to get? How much of a piece is Brait going to get? Or Godwin? Or Humphreys? Or whoever the hell's on the field? Brait and the running backs, Ronald Jones, who knows? Right? That's what you're trying to determine. So that's what, like, a pie graph of equity distribution. So you're looking for high equity situations, which doesn't have to come in the high total games. It can come in the low total games. Even though it's a smaller pie, a bigger piece of a smaller pie may be better than a small piece of a bigger pie. Take a look at this past weekend with fucking Vance McDonald. Great game environment, high total, small piece of a big pie. Or you could have gone to fucking David Johnson or some shit, bigger piece of a smaller pie. Okay, these are the concepts you have to weigh in your head. Okay, that's what essentially you're looking for, and then base it on the salary. Obviously, is these pieces of what I predict worth X price for the contest that I'm in? Okay, so that's understand equity distribution. There's going to be 4 touchdowns by this team. Where the touchdowns is it going to be through the pass? Is it going to be through the run? Is it going to be who's it going to? Who's it more likely going to? And that's why you look at stuff like target share and average depth of target and all the sports stats go into this. Okay, this type of thing. This is the sports side of it. Okay, can you follow along that I fucking... This is the sports side. Okay, this is what most people focus on. But this is essentially what you're doing in a mathematical form, right? You're looking for the big pies and the big pieces. Or the big, wherever. Where the piece is the best. Okay? That's the sports side. That's everything else you do. In baseball, you're looking at fucking ISO, not average, but OPS and home run and strikeout percentage and all the sports stuff. This is all of the sports stuff. Okay? This is, you gotta start here, right? Whatever. But this is really what you're doing. Okay. But then, when we come into projections, typically, projection systems look at this, and then come up with a number, turning this into a number, okay? Most of the time, you come up with a number that's just like 10 or something, 6, right? But that projection doesn't mean, like, they can't predict the future. Like, they're not fucking soothsayers and shit. It's not going to be 6. 6 is the mean of a range of outcomes. So whenever you see a projection, always treat it as a range, as a set of numbers with specific frequencies. These are mathematical terms now. So you're looking at this. Whenever you see this X, that projection of 6 really means if you ran this out X number of times, 1,000,000 times or whatever, that sometimes it'll be 3, sometimes it'll be 12, sometimes it'll be 8, sometimes it'll be 5, like whatever. All of this, they run out and then you make the average, and the average is going to be that. The average amount of times, it's going to be whatever that X is. And then you have to look at the frequency of each of those things happening. Okay? So a type of player, like someone that only rushes the ball forward, right? I mean, doesn't pass catches or anything like that. Basically, normally carries the ball somewhere between 15 and 20 times, averages 4 yards a carry, and averages a half a touchdown a game or something like that. Okay? So what is that? 12 points or something like that? You're probably going to see someone of that player type with a frequency that is much more narrow. There's going to be less 3 touchdown games. There's probably going to be less 1-point games if they're getting 15, 20 carries. But sometimes they're just running into the line, right? 20 carries, 50 yards, right? No touchdowns, 5 points. Woohoo, there you go. But the likelihood of them getting 5 points is probably pretty high on the frequency scale. Them getting fucking 30 points is probably very low at the low end. Them getting 0 is probably low at the at this end as well. So you have to have a frequency of how everything goes. Cash game plays typically have narrow ranges, right? You want to see, you're more likely to see a frequency of X amount of points, and then the salary being, if like for a cash game, if it's like 3X or something. If you want to make a just a general statement of if I'm taking a 5K player, I'm looking to get 15 points. So where does 15 points show up on this frequency of the range of outcomes for this mean projection? Okay? Now, 15 for one guy and 15 for another guy have a different curve, have a different frequency. They do. The guy that I'm talking about has, much narrower frequency. But a guy that, Traquan Smith, like last night and shit for the Saints, right? He's a long cat. He may only get 3 targets the whole game. And either he takes down a 50-yard pass or he doesn't. So his mean projection could still be 8, just like another guy's 8. But his frequency in this set of range of outcomes, you're going to see a lot of zeros. 0, 1, 3, but you'll also see 26. You'll see 42, and then 3. You're not going to see a lot in the middle. So the frequency graph is going to be not big, narrow in the middle. It's going to be kind of lopsided up here and up there, and not much in the middle. But the average together equals the same amount as the Derrick Henry type or whatever, Marshawn Lynch. Or say, the guy, or Quincy Enunwa types, like the low guy, 5 catches, 50 yards. That's going to happen more often than not. Probably not going to have a 200-yard game. Probably not going to have a 0-target game, although Enunwa did, he didn't catch any of his targets yesterday. But those would be prototypical players that could be relied on for X number of points, more often than not, but really don't get little and don't get a lot, right? Okay, so always think in terms of frequency, range of outcomes. That's what the projection means, okay? Okay, so to put that in more of a graph sense as far as what contest types you're playing, okay? If you're playing the Millie Maker, you're looking your overall lineup, you want the high end of that frequency. You want as many times as possible in all probability that they could score towards the top end of their range. Now, they'll also have a lot of times where they score towards the low end of their range. The guys that are in the middle, that have a lot, they score a lot of times right in that 3X spot, but they don't really score 0 or 30. Typically, those aren't good GPP plays. Those are good cash plays because in cash, you're not looking for the best score. You're just looking for the 55th percentile. You're just looking to beat 55% of your field. You make money that way in relation to everyone that's playing. So in a cash game, you're going to see this type of frequency graph. This is what you're looking for in the same type of projection. Okay? So from 0 to 12 or something like that, you're looking for this spot right over here. If this dotted line is the 55th percentile, you're looking for more of the frequency past that line. And you're going to see a lot more dips on the other ends. Okay? That's what you're looking for. This space right here. The upside, you're looking for, you don't want, in GPP, you don't want this. You want a lot of this pushed up, right? And this is going to be pushed down also. But in cash, these don't happen that often. So you could rely on here, on this graph, it would be like 5 points. So 5 points happens in a percentage, like this percentage of this whole distribution curve may happen 40% of the time, right? This may represent 40%. So you have a 40% chance of getting somewhere around within like 1 standard deviation or something of the projection, right? You wouldn't mind this spot. You wouldn't mind over here. At least you're not putting in a dud. You're getting 3 here. You're getting 7 there, which is still fine, but it's a high percentage chance. Even if you cut out and just go even underneath, go to the 40th percentile, that still encompasses more than 50% of their projected score, okay? So this is a cash game play for that reason. Now you take a look at a GPP play, and you get a wide range of outcomes, okay? A lot more times they score 0 and 1 and 2, and a lot more times they score 12, 13, and 14, okay? But the amount of times they score, it's still the mean projection is the same as the other guys, same right over here, but there's like 10% of the time they even get that, right? 10% of the time. And then if you cut it out and you go to the 44th, 5th percentile, it's still like 20% of the time they get between 3 and 7, right? Now, a high percentage, now if you cut out the middle, these middle two right here, I'm trying to do it with my fingers. Like this part and this part may equal total combined 50% of their range, right? But 25% of it is high and 25% of it is fucking low, right? So that's why in GPP, you're looking for guys like that. If they either typically half the time they give you fucking nothing or barely anything, or they give you 5x, 6x value. But they actually don't give you in the middle all that often, right? One or the other. Less often than the other guy, right? So cash versus GPP. That's what you're looking for when it comes to the two different types of game style. And this also goes for salary adjustment. Like, you know, if this guy is $10 million, I mean, you don't play him. I mean, like, it all depends. Like, I don't mind this guy in cash at minimum price, right? Because the likelihood of him, 50% of the, if 30% of the time he puts up 5x, but I'm getting him for 3K, I'll take a shot. It's a high variance shot, but it's worth the set. I mean, I'm paying minimum price for that opportunity. For $3,000, I could get 20 points more than 30% of the time, right? Versus if he was 10,000, now that changes everything. Now, yes, he'll get it 30% of the time, but 30% of the time will be zero, and you're paying 10K, 11K for fucking nothing, okay? That's what makes it a GPP play, depending on the price. So this guy, who has a wide range of outcomes, as the price goes down, you could take on the risk, okay? All of this also factors in. That's why the frequencies are all risk related. These are all probabilities. Once you understand that it's a range of outcomes, right? What's the risk? What's the percentage of times that the frequency hits those numbers? Okay? High percentage times in the middle, you have less risk in cash, dependent on the salary. So take a look at this past Sunday. We had Marquez Valdez Scantling, 3,300 for the Packers, filling in with Cobb and Allison out. You figure he's probably going to be on the field a lot. You really have no past history to go by, but Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball. You put all that assessment together, okay? And maybe it's hard to make a projection or something on him, but you look at the risk. You go, 3,300, what is 3x? What is cash value? 9 points? 9 points is what? A score of what? 5 for 40. 5 catches for 40 yards. How often will that happen? Okay? How often will 1 catch for 8 yards happen? Which is 1.8 points. Okay? How often will 3 for 20 and 5 points? You do that in your head. Do that and consider that in your head. What are the outcomes? What's the outcome of 9 for 120 and 2 touchdowns? Probably low. Probably fucking low. But for 3,300, if you only need 9 points to hit that 55th percentile, how often does he get at least 9 points? If you figure that's like 70% of the time, then fucking plug him in. Just plug him in. If you think it's low, where's the point in which you figure that it's not worth to play that guy for 3,300? Now, you take another guy, I don't know, I mean, who else played yesterday? You take fucking Juju Smith-Schuster, right? 7,500. Okay, to hit that 55th percentile, you may need what? On a 7,500 salary, you may need 20 points, right? What's a 20-point line, right? 8 for 100, right? Something like that. Well, obviously, possibly a touchdown. What's the frequency? What's the probability of that happening? Better game environment. Remember, we also go back to equity distribution. He is in the highest total game. He does get targets. He has there's a big pie there, but he's not the biggest piece of that pie. But you have to figure in your head, how many percentage of the time does he get at least 5 points? Probably very high, right? 95+% of the time. How much frequency does he get? 7 points, right? That's like 1x value. That's 92% of the time. How about 9 points? That may happen 82% of the time. How about 10 points? That may be 78% of the time. Do you see what I'm talking about? That's what I mean by the frequency, the probability of these numbers happening. Okay? So what's the probability of him putting up at least 18 points, right? Maybe it's 46%, or just come up with a number, right? But you have to combine at least 18, at least 17, at least 16, at least 15, at least 14. There's also a high percentage of the time in relation to other guys that he puts up 30 plus points. He may put that up 6% of the time, right? But it's still more so than some fucking backup tight end, right? Or someone else at that salary, right? You look and you go, how often will they put up 30 plus points? Well, 2% of the time versus 6% of the time. How much will they put up 20 points? How many percentage of the time? So I look between the two guys, Adam Thielen and Juju Smith-Schuster. Adam Thielen was in a lower game environment. So, like, they were in a lower game while Schuster was in a thin game. But Thielen, like, he's the model of consistency. Like, if you told me who has a higher percentage chance of getting 20 points, I'd probably put Thielen above Juju Smith-Schuster in that game on Sunday. The raw projection probably has Juju a point higher, probably. Probably because of the game environment and touchdown equity. Higher there. But Thielen technically is probably a better cash play because Thielen having a 4 for 30 game is probably much lower percentage than Juju having a 4 for 30 game. So you're going to come up with these types of distribution curves for these players. Okay? So then you say to me, okay, Thielen's a better cash play than Juju in a vacuum, right? They get Thielen has more of this area over the 55th percentile. Juju has less, but he obviously has higher upside and downside. That's the risk that you have to mitigate. And in cash games, you want to lower your risk, right? I want the safest points to get to the 55th percentile. But now you have to take into account ownership, okay? And this is where a lot of people go wrong or don't understand the concept that well. Ownership, I'm not even talking about GPP. I'm talking about in cash games. Ownership does matter in cash games. Don't let people tell you otherwise. Ownership is part of daily fantasy sports as a game. Okay? You have anything that affects your score and your performance in a contest has to affect your decision making to some extent. Okay? So, in this example of Juju versus Thielen, similar price. I mean, there was like a 200 difference the other day. Thielen, from a graph perspective, is a better cash play. He's more consistently going to be and give you the 55th percentile value needed more so than Juju. Although Juju probably has a slightly better chance of putting up a bigger score, but also a lower score. The question comes in is that based on projected ownership, if you listen around the industry or whatever, these are the types of things you have to weigh in your head, do yourself, or look at a site or whatever and try to weigh how many people are going to play him. If you're playing a 100-man double up, right? You play a 100-man double up, you need to, how many of these people are going to play these people, right? So let's say you think Thielen is a better cash play. You're going to hit more often than not with him over Juju. But Juju is expected or projected to be 40% owned in your contests, and Thielen would be 4% owned. Okay? Now you have to take that disparity between the two and go, is it worth the risk of Juju putting up the high and low end of his ranges? Okay? That's what you're looking at. If they're close, play who you think is the best player. Okay? I'm not talking about, well, this guy's going to be 32 and mine's going to be 26. Because you're still making that same assessment, but the 8% difference, it's almost like you don't have to worry about it as much. I mean, it's going to matter for a point or two. Something like that. But in big disparities, 40 to 4. So if Juju, so we take the two players. if Juju puts up a massive score for 35 points and Thielen just puts up a low end range, but not a bad score, puts up a 16, 40% of the people have those extra points. It's going to be very detrimental to you because you're going to be down 20 points to 40% of the field, right? So you look at that and you go, maybe I should have played Juju. But think of the opposite side. If Juju puts up the lower end of the range, only puts up 8 points, and Thielen puts up the high end of his range and puts up 28 points, like, basically you wiped out pretty much 40% of the field. The problem is that in cash games, you don't get rewarded for that big leverage. You don't get rewarded for it. So, hey, look at all the people back there. As long as you're in the 55th percentile and 99th percentile, same fucking money. So that leverage doesn't gain you all that much. Just makes it easy to, you can have duds in the rest of your lineup, right? But the risk, if it happens the other way, is disastrous. Disastrous. If one guy is 80% owned and he puts up fucking 7x, you're done. There's nearly no way for the probability of you getting enough points from the rest of your lineup. You're dead because, like everyone has, 80% of the field has like fucking all these points that you don't have. Okay? So even if you thought that Thielen was a better play than Juju, you have to assess the probability of that flip. What is that probability? Okay? And is it for 40 to 4, 10 times more likely that that's not going to happen, right? To go from a 40% owned guy in cash to a 4% owned guy, right? You're going to need to make sure that it's not 10 times more likely that that situation doesn't happen. So like with the MVS play with Valdez-Scantling, at 3,300, he puts up 19 points like he did, and half the field has him at nearly 6.5x. It's like, you're in bad shape. You're in bad fucking shape. So thinking in terms of what the upside is, no, I'd rather play some other guy. Like, you have to think about it. Is there a number you could put on it? There is. I mean, obviously you could make the assessment and you could put this in some type of model and make a number out of it. But just the concept in and of itself. Sometimes in soccer, it's more beneficial to play a high goal scoring odds forward in cash, an expensive one, only for the sake of there's really not many other forward options that you like. And if he does score 2 goals, you're fucked because probably going to be 80+% owned. Okay? If you don't think they're going to be 80% owned, if you think it's going to be 40%, then fine. It's perfectly fine not to play them. But that's why you would play a suboptimal play in cash games because a lot of other people are playing it. Typically, it's to protect against that player's upside rather than gain the extra point that you project on the range of outcomes. So even if you think Thielen puts up one more point on average over the course of a million times more than Juju, Juju will put up a much higher score than Thielen more than 10% of the time, right? Even 10. That's all you need, 10% of the time. Now, if the ownership difference was 40% and 20%, now it's only half the time. Then it's like, okay, then maybe just play Thielen, and who cares about the 40% of people that own him? Because the ownership difference isn't going to matter that much, even in cash games. That assessment, it's a probability. It's a risk management assessment. That's what you're doing in cash games. You're looking, going, I think Marvin Jones is underpriced, but he's not a quintessential type of cash game player. Typically guy 4,700 probably should be 5,400, but he doesn't get that many targets, right? It's like he may only get 5 or 6 targets, and if he doesn't come down with it, he could have a low score if he doesn't have touchdown equity or whatever. And you go, I'd rather play D.D. Westbrook, but Marvin Jones is going to be 30% owned, and D.D. Westbrook's going to be 3% owned. And although I think D.D. Westbrook, from a raw projection standpoint, is a point higher, I'm going to go with the higher owned guy in this specific situation because Marvin Jones could also put up a 8 for 100 and 2 touchdown game, right? Someone with a narrow curve, like I showed before, probably doesn't have that upside. I didn't mind, like the first week, I didn't play Jarvis Landry. He ended up being like 40% owned in cash. He put up like 11 points, which wasn't the end of the world, but I didn't play him, and I didn't feel like I needed to, I didn't like the play, and I didn't feel like I needed to block to protect that high percentage upside there. I thought there was enough value that slate that, like, that was the slate that Connor was 4,500 and whatever. Remember when you faded Connor this weekend? Yeah. But that's the reason I faded Connor. I was wrong about Connor. So you're wrong about a lot. Then Connor was 28% owned in cash. I was fine in cash. I was perfectly fine in cash because he was 28% owned. I have no problem. I thought there were better more safe plays. Connor was in a great spot. I wasn't the percentage of times. Remember, I'm looking at percentages. I'm looking at probabilities. For cash games, I want the highest amount of certainty. I will pay for certainty. I will pay for higher probability over raw projection. Right? We take a look. I will pay a little equity and a little extra for this space in cash games because I just have to hit this line. That's the point. That's why even in soccer, when I see people play 3 goal-dependent forwards, going, dude, you're gonna have to hit this like twice. Like yes, they could put up a higher score on average, but I mean they're gonna put up duds more often than my guy. I'm just gonna sit here with my 6 points and let you just run into the wall. And sometimes you beat me by 40 points, and sometimes you'll lose by 40 points. Why are cash games easier in NFL than in soccer? Because there's softer money in the NFL. That's the reason. There's a lot of dumb people, and there's a lot of them. NFL is the most popular daily fantasy sport. There's a lot more casual players and a lot more people that don't know how to fucking play well. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. There are people that think they play well, and they don't. Right? There's one guy on Reddit that was like, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was 45% owned in cash games. I feel that that's a sharp play. And is there any edge in cash games anymore? And people are responding. It's like, well, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, 55% of the people didn't play him, right? James, that first week in NFL where everyone was James Conner was 4,500 or some shit, right? James Conner in my cash games was around 55% owned. And that week, right? 55% owned, which was extremely high owned. 45% of the people didn't fucking play him, right? That's why they're easier. And soccer, sometimes it's like the 2v2 on a fullback. Because it's like the obvious stuff, just the smaller contests. 23-man contests. You may have at least 15 people that know what the fuck they're doing. Right? That's why you need to beat people based on the relative score. It's not a matter of, I put up enough points. Well, enough points depended on who you're playing against. The 55th percentile in a sharp 11-man contest is much higher than a 55th percentile score in a 500-man $1 double up with a bunch of idiots, right? But you're still looking to aim for the 55th percentile in cash games. But this is why ownership matters. Ownership determines the risk you're taking on. Okay? That's the difference. It's not, I'm playing a guy because other people are playing the guy, right? I'm playing a guy that I think actually is a lesser play because everyone else is playing them, because the difference between all the other plays are so marginal that I might as well just try to win elsewhere. Right? Instead of, if this guy who's going to be popular does extremely well, I'm fucked. Right? Do I use this system in NBA? Yes, this has nothing to do with the sport. None of this stuff has to do with anything that has to do with sports. Yes, NBA, soccer, this is all of DFS. How do you know what everyone else is playing? Well, you look at I think blah, blah, this quarterback, Brady is typically a little bit more popular than should be, right? You take a look at, you listen around the industry. You go to site, read what people are reading, what people are writing, and everything. You go, well, everyone's going to be a Marvin Jones this week, right? Give me 3 pass-catching running backs every week and let everyone fuck around with the top wide receivers. I agree with you. That's the way I traditionally play cash. Yes. Good. For this, but you do it because of this. This is a pass-catching running back. This is a top wide receiver. This is Antonio Brown. This is Julio Jones. This is whoever's up there, right? That's this guy. Pass-catching running backs tend to be this, right? So give me 3 in the flex, right? But that's the reason. I'm giving you the mathematical, like that's the concept that you're using. So try to apply and think of things in terms of this more in the other sports that you're playing and NFL and whatever. But this is a cash game, GPP, right? And it all depends on price. You don't mind the high upside type of guys if they're so underpriced that compared to the percentage of the frequency that they do put up a big score, it's worth it. If Antonio Brown was 3K, and you take him, right? You don't go, well, he's boom or bust or something, bullshit, right? You just take him. And but also if he's 90% owned and he puts up a 3-pointer, well, everyone has him, so who cares? Who would I consider to be the top catching running backs? Obviously like Gurley, Gordon, McCaffrey, right? It depends who's on the slate, right? Kamara, well, when Ingram wasn't there, I guess. It all depends on the price, the opportunity. Depends who's out. Look, TJ Yeldon. Sure, there you go. When playing 3 running backs, are you looking for stacks? Will you put your hand-drawn graphs on your website for a beloved video? No, Skyler, get out of here. Stacks and GPP, by the way, are correlation plays. Right? The only reason you stack is for correlation. Because when one event happens, the other event happens. But that's GPP based. You don't care about that in cash games. To say you don't, but it's not important. You're just looking for a 55th percentile score. You don't, if you're gonna play Antonio Brown and you're gonna play Vance McDonald, like why not play Ben Roethlisberger? Because if Antonio Brown and McDonald have 2 touchdowns each, well then Roethlisberger has 4 touchdowns. Right? Best plays in cash, sometimes they okay. But they weigh that situation. Sometimes game stack. You go, it's a 58 total. I just want you take a look at this and you go, I just want all of this. Just give me this whole pie and let everyone else try to find the pieces in all the other games. Perfectly fine. But there's a number related to this. Right? It's not a matter of doing one thing or the other thing as a rule. It's a matter of what percentage of time will this happen versus taking, pieces of all the other games, right? As a probability. Feels like some people just don't even fucking get this. You're good, then I'll just fucking beat you all the time. That's fine. This is thinking of it as a game. Remember, we already took into the fact of all the targets and all the bullshit. I don't write. There's no book coming out. I don't write anything. You know how much money you have to pay me to write? No one can pay me that much. Takes too long. Look at this. I've been on for 40 minutes. Here's my book. There you go. It's not a book. This isn't magic. This isn't revolutionary. None of this, I'm telling you, is new. None of it. Are you increasing your output in cash? Yeah. Well, my bankroll's higher, so I get play a higher percentage of my bankroll. When's my comedy special coming? This is my comedy special, right? This is my comedy special. I just bought Fantasy Supreme's book. Yeah, it's probably a lot of misspelling, a lot of little squiggly red lines in Fantasy Supreme's book, right? Capital letters for no reason, apostrophes for no reason. Dragon, naturally speaking. Okay, you can do that. Any strategy you have specifically for the NBA? This is it! This is it! Why do I have to yell at people? Apply this to NBA. What's so complicated? It has nothing to do with the sport. None of this. None of it. You could reply this to how many tomatoes are available in fucking Kroger. It's the same shit. It's probability theory. It's the same fucking thing. How do you take that in a basketball game, right? 227 points. Another basketball game, 198 points. High total game, low total game. This game has Kevin Durant, and he's eating whatever. And Steph Curry isn't in, so he's going to have a huge piece, right? This game has fucking no one. I mean, it's the same shit, right? NBA will be closer to NFL than soccer with the free squares and cash. Okay. But that's all you're doing. This is NBA also. And then you look and you go, do I play in NBA? You look at this. And you go, who's a better cash play? Typically, guys that touch the ball, more active, more rebounds. Rebounds are more predictive, right? So cash plays, right? When you take LeBron James, you're getting this, right? Most likely doesn't dud. You're paying for it, but I wouldn't, whatever. Or you're taking centers, right? When you take DeAndre Jordan or Andre Drummond, you're getting this, right? He plays a ton of minutes, right? You're going to play 40. Any guy that plays 40, like Paul George, is this. Paul George plays 40 minutes a game. He gives you extra. You're not going to get 12 points from it. But when you play like a shooting guy, right? When you play fucking Bradley Beal or some shit, right? Shooting guard types, Klay Thompson. So games with the hires over usually have more people using them, right? Because they're bigger pies. And you especially, if you have a big pie and a guy that's going to get a big piece of that big pie, they're going to be chalk, especially if they're priced down. Right? It comes down to salary. But even if you have a big pie with a guy with a big piece of pie and they're 12K, that's Russell Westbrook. That's LeBron James. You go, well, I'm paying 12K, but I could lock in 50 points. Right? That may not win me a GPP, but makes a great cash play, ain't going to get fucking 20. Right? So that's what makes them. That's what the floor means. That's what that term floor and ceiling, they're not mathematical terms. Floor just means that they have a higher frequency, right? A floor means they have a higher frequency of scores in this range. That's what floor means. Ceiling means they have a higher frequency of scores in the top and the low end. That's what ceiling means. Okay? It's still part of a frequency distribution curve. Fucking dude, go to math class. Fucking dude, go take a fucking math class. And then your risk is ownership. That's in cash games. That's how your risk management. I think this guy's a great play. He's going to be 1% owned. If he puts up a 0 for 8K, you're fucked. So you have to weigh that. I'm not saying not to do it, but you have to weigh that of like, if I choose this guy over that guy, and this guy goes off and mine doesn't, it doesn't matter what the rest of my lineup does. Give us your cash plays for this weekend NFL. No! I'll give you my way. You do it. Yeah, I'll give you these. This is why I don't do picks. This is DFS. This is how you play DFS. Then you do it on your own. Why do you think I play guys like Joe Matinho and fucking Aaron Moy and those fucking guys and fucking Burgard Munson? It's these guys. That's that. It's all these guys. Right? Lock it in. Just give me this big fat fucking piece of dick right over here. Right? It kind of looks like a dick. Right? I want the head. I want a big head on my dick. I don't want some nubby shit. Right? I don't want the nubby shit guy in my cash lineup. Save the nubby shit guy for GPP. I want the big fat dickheads. I profited all weeks in NFL except week 1. Okay. Week 1 was the easiest one. How do you not fucking win week 1? I profited all weeks except last week. But it was only a 14% loss. So, not bad. Perfectly fine. I made a mistake. I knew I was wrong, and I made it anyway. Based on my fucking papers, I fucking made a mistake. I shouldn't have played Vance McDonald. I should have done what I should have done. I should have played Nick Vannett and Ben Roethlisberger. I had Stafford and Vance, and I thought Vance being 3,700, he's part of the big piece of the pie. But, like, is he worth... What makes him worth 1,000 more than any of the other tight ends? Like, what makes that... Like, if I can't get up to Jimmy Graham at 4,700, then what am I paying for Vance for? I might as well just pay for C.J. Uzomah or Nick Vannett or one of those fucking guys. Right? So that's why I thought. It's like, what? I'm paying an extra 1,000 for what reason? To get exposure to the 5th, 6th option in a high total game? So that's what I did, and I played Stafford because I thought he was the safest quarterback for 5,700. But Ben Roethlisberger at 6,900 was safer, but just not safer point per dollar. That's the point that I'm making with all these fucking things. 6,900 I thought was slightly overpriced for the cash frequency of using him. But I should have paid up for that safety. And then paid down for Vannett, who could have given me 0, but Vance could have given me 0. But the mistake wasn't doing the change. Like, that wasn't the mistake in my mind. I didn't make the assessment that, because I was thinking in terms of Vance would be 40% owned, and if Vannett puts up a 0 and Vance puts up a 15, I'm in a bad leverage spot. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't think of the opposite. I'm kicking myself because I didn't think in terms of I had Stafford and Vance. If I go to Vannett and Ben Roethlisberger and Vance McDonald scores a touchdown, who's throwing him the ball? Ben Roethlisberger. So Vance's 6 points, I get 4 from. And most likely people are not playing Ben Roethlisberger, less ownership on Ben Roethlisberger. So the risk of not playing Vance McDonald is actually mitigated a lot by playing his quarterback. So that's the mistake that I made because I wanted to do that. I looked at my cash line, but I go, why am I paying for Vance? What makes him 1,000 better than the other tight ends that I can't upgrade elsewhere? I think Roethlisberger and Stafford Roethlisberger has a higher projection. Is it worth the extra 1,200? No, it's not. For the 55th percentile score. But Roethlisberger has a higher frequency, a higher probability of giving me 20 points of what I need than Stafford. Stafford's probably not going to give me 8. But still, Ben Roethlisberger, if Stafford gets 17, Roethlisberger gets 20. And it's like, is that worth the 1,200? I don't think so. But the difference is that I don't think the 1,200 between Vannett and Vance McDonald is much either. So I wanted to go down, but I knew Vannett was going to be like fucking 3% owned in cash. No one was going to own him in cash. So I'm like, just fucking play Vance and just fucking block. Not realizing that Roethlisberger would be my quarterback. So even if Vance does put up a big game, it's not all being leveraged because I have the quarterback. So that's the mistake. I mean, I put up enough points. I mean, I play enough head-to-heads that I was fine. I mean, I had a 14% loss overall. So I wasn't off the cliff or anything. I put up a 137 in my head-to-head lineups. But I had 150. I was fine. So that, to me, that's the mistake of the process. Not of the result, of the process. It didn't hit me until an hour after the slate locked. And I'm like, but if I would have played Ben, like, if Vance gets a touchdown, I get 4 points. I get 4 and 6. If Vance puts up a 110 one line, right? Just gets whatever. 1 catch for 10 yards with a touchdown. Like Ben gets, that's what? 2, that's 8 points for Vance. I'm getting 4 plus the 10 yards or whatever, 4.3? So it's like the leverage position, even with the 40% difference in ownership, is much, much more mitigated in that sense. And that's the assessment that I didn't do. That's the point that I call a mistake. I don't look at the result as the mistake. Thank you. Hit me up on Twitter if you're actually the girl in your picture. Too bad I'm not the girl in my picture. I have no girls in my picture. I like the way that I try to do something somewhat serious. Show you some math, flash some fucking papers, and of course, people that follow me are just like, you want to talk more about pies? I like apple pie, right? Right? Bullshit. Fucking bullshit. So was that understandable? Was that worth it? Was that worth me doing all this? Was that worth my doodles? My doodles? I doodle for you people. Fucking doodle. How often do I doodle?